Good morning, everyone. I try to appreciate all weather. So it's been a bit overcast and more wintry feeling here in the last few weeks than what I normally remember May being. But thank you all for showing up. I want to extend my gratitude to White Heron Sangha for allowing us to use this space every week. It is a beautiful space, as you can see, and I very much appreciate being able to be here. I also like to acknowledge the indigenous people who lived here for thousands of years, the Northern Chumash, and it occurred to me it's one thing to acknowledge, how to put this? It occurred to me the Chumash were the people of this land. And in a way, there's no separation, I think, in a culture like that between the land and the people. And so it's also the land and the plants and animals and all creatures that lived here during the time of the Chumash. I'd like to acknowledge that we are here passing through in our lives that continue back for thousands and thousands of millennia. So, attention. Who am I right now? Well, there's my short answer. But that makes for a very short Dharma talk. It occurred to me, because when I write and prepare for these talks, it's almost endless. And at a certain point, I have to stop. But I did get some insights from last night when I printed this till now. And one thing is, if I was to give a title to this beyond who am I now, it would be bearing witness to oneself. How do we bear witness to oneself? But back to this first response of who am I right now? I am just this. I am just here. I am sitting. But you are all listening. And who we are is who we are in the moment and the place we're at. My talking, looking through the window there at the site, looking around here, seeing you sitting, feeling the bottom of my cushion. That is who I am. This being through perceiving and doing and thinking are manifestations of myself. Uchiyama wrote this about the self. He said, when I use the term self, I'm not referring to some fixed entity. The self is life, and life is functioning. Functioning means activity which works toward the world in which this self lives. It means that your life manifests itself as life. It is a self that works to settle or bring composure to everything you encounter in your life. And sometimes when I'm listening to a Dharma talk, I kind of think, oh, this talk is about somewhere else, some other time. I go listen to the Dharma talk, then I go start living my life. But it is here, and it's always here. No matter who's giving the Dharma talk, whether it's a koan or whatever, it's not about some future time that we're going to finally get around to living. So here Uchiyama is referring to the big self we all possess, our Buddha nature. My functioning right now is sitting and talking and perceiving with my senses what is happening in this room and in this immediate environment. When Uchiyama writes, functioning means activity which works towards the world in which the self lives, he is not referring, as I just mentioned, to some activity that we will engage in the future. He means the activity we are involved in that right now. In this case, me talking and you listening, you sitting, I'm sitting, all the different activities that are taking place. So this activity also involves the sounds and other sensations that are occurring during the talk. Of course, functioning does not mean just going about our daily routines habitually, doing what needs to be done as we encounter different life experiences. There's another aspect of living which I think is implied, what Uchiyama says, but it's not explicitly stated. That is, we need to be aware of our life activity as we are engaged in it. Of course, living totally aware in each moment is impossible all the time. The practice of staying present each moment takes a lot of focus and energy. Learning to be fully present in daily life is perhaps the greatest challenge of our Buddhist practice. The importance of cultivating a state of mindfulness is captured succinctly in an encounter the Buddha had with a philosopher of his time, as recounted by Thich Nhat Hanh. The encounter begins with this philosopher inquiring of the Buddha, "I've heard that Buddhism is a doctrine of enlightenment. What is your method? What do you practice every day?" "We walk, we eat, we wash ourselves, we sit down." "What is so special about that? Everyone walks, eats, washes, sits down." "Sir, when we walk, we are aware that we are walking. When we eat, we are aware that we are eating. When others walk, eat, wash, or sit down, they are generally not aware of what they are doing." Thich Nhat Hanh comments on this encounter by stating, "In Buddhism, mindfulness is the key. Mindfulness is the energy that sheds light on all things and all activities, producing the power of concentration, bringing forth deep insight and awakening. Mindfulness is at the basis of all Buddhist practice." So Thich Nhat Hanh's commentary on this encounter sums up our Buddhist practice as simply as possible. He says, mindfulness is at the base of all Buddhist practice. It is through mindfulness that we wake up to life and discover our true self. This is not a difficult concept to understand, but it is extremely difficult to practice every moment of our life. The need to remain vigilant is key. How do we stay vigilant? If we do not develop skillful means for developing our awareness of what is happening in our lives, any success at doing so will be unlikely. There's an old Zen story. A student said to Master Ichu, "Please write for me something of great wisdom." Master Ichu picked up his brush and wrote one word, "Attention." Stop me if you've heard this before. The student said, "Is that all?" The master wrote, "Attention, attention." The student became irritable. "That doesn't seem profound or subtle to me." In response, Master Ichu wrote simply, "Attention, attention, attention." In frustration, the student demanded, "What does this word attention mean?" Master Ichu replied, "Attention means attention." The way we open the door to mindfulness is through attention. Attending to what is happening in one's life is waking up to that life moment. If I can maintain my attention on what is happening in the moment, I become mindful of the activity which works toward the world in which this self lives. But as we all know, there are many, many obstacles in life that keep us from living fully in each moment. Our attention is often diverted by the distractions we encounter every day in life. Being human, we often find ourselves living a dual life of being somewhat aware of the present moment and being preoccupied with the myriad distractions we encounter each day. Where we put our attention in life is key to the quality of life we live. We've confined ourselves more absorbed in our life story than we happen to be, and than where we happen to be and what we happen to be doing. Our attention is sidetracked. When we become absorbed in our life story, we place our small self in the center of life. Instead of being present in the moment, we become preoccupied with our ego self. Our life story and all things, thoughts, dreams, worries, personal dramas that we create in our minds absorb our attention. These thoughts and emotions, our life story, becomes central to what we come to believe is our life. Even Zen practice becomes a distraction when we regard it as a self-improvement project. The more we believe our ego stories, the more we are separated from the rest of life. We are only partially present, partially alive. It's like being drunk on ideas and thoughts that we think are of the utmost importance, but in reality are just illusions. We delude ourselves into thinking these emotions, thoughts, and stories are real. In this life story, it's as if we are the central character in a book or a movie. The more we believe the story, the more we come to believe the world revolves around who we are. Our ego in the story it creates become our most precious possession, and it's very difficult to let go of it. It is this delusion that we must cut through to begin to realize who we really are. It is this small self that prevents us from fully being alive and realizing our greater self. At some point, we must come face to face with this obstacle to enlightenment. In her book, When Things Fall Apart, Pema Chodron writes, "During a long retreat, I had what seemed to me the earth-shaking revelation that we cannot be in the present moment and run our storylines at the same time. Not being completely present each moment of our lives, we miss out on living fully. Doing something not fully aware of what we are doing is just like going through the motions of life. I experience this when I put something down, like a book or a cup, and moments later wonder where it is. There are many things I've done so many times they become automatic. I might drive to the store and back, not really paying attention to what I was doing or where I had been. I've done things like this so many times, I don't have to think about what I'm doing. Sometimes I don't pay attention to what I'm doing because there's something I'd rather do instead. It's like the bumper stickers you see that say something like, I'd rather be golfing. I wonder about the people who are driving the cars with those bumper stickers. I think I'd rather they were paying attention to driving than dreaming about playing golf. Fortunately, there are practices that help us to wake up and attend to what we are doing. Some of them have been taught to me, and others I have discovered on my own based on what I have learned through my Buddhist practice. A place to begin is noticing what I am doing. If I'm caught up in my life story, I can change my focus to where I happen to be or to what I happen to be doing. It may be I realize I'm preoccupied with an attitude of not wanting to do what I'm doing and shifting my attention so I can become fully engaged with where I am and what is happening in the moment. Sometimes it is actually my lack of attention that allows me to wake up. I have more than a few times experienced stubbing a toe or knocking over a glass of water, which leads to the realization my mind was somewhere else, thinking about something other than what I was doing at the time. If I'm in a good mood, I might even smile or laugh at myself for being absent-minded. It is at that moment that I have an opportunity to become fully engaged with what it was I was doing instead of doing it by force of habit. At other times, I can shift my focus from a negative feeling about a task I'm doing to doing the task mindfully. I used to run a story through my mind about how unfair it was that I had to put away the dishes more often than my wife. I even knew it wasn't a true story, but it still would come up almost every time I did that job. And then there was one time I realized nobody cared except for me about that feeling. All the feeling was doing was making me feel lousy, and I still had to do the dishes. It occurred to me finally that I could change my attitude toward this task by making it a mindful practice. I did this by approaching putting the dishes away as an opportunity to be in the present moment. I turned this unpleasant task into something meaningful by shifting my focus from my feeling about what I was doing to the act of what I was doing. I chose to be curious about my task and put my attention to feeling each object and carefully noticing its weight as I was working with it. I treated each object I put away as something as precious and beautiful as a bowl that was an heirloom. The more I focused on this task, the more my annoyance receded in my consciousness. The more the impulse to create a story around my task faded, the more the feelings surrounding it became irrelevant to the task. By maintaining this focus, I experienced what I was doing just as I was doing it. When I was putting the dishes away, I was just putting away the dishes. I came to the realization that whether it was my turn or not to do the dishes was irrelevant. What is important is, can I change my way of looking at tasks that I find annoying or beneath me to ones that become a way of practicing mindfulness? Taking a moment, noticing, and then stopping a habitual activity or story provides a space and time to redirect my attention. It provides a precious opportunity to re-engage with life and my bigger self. The small self we've become attached to is not who we are. It is really not that difficult to see that there is no self that does not change. Even if we identify with a role we play in life, such as being a parent, teacher, doctor, lawyer, there is no behavior directly related to these professions that we exhibit every moment of every day. When we take out the trash, we don't say to ourselves, "Here I am, Professor such and such, taking out the trash." When I put my grandchildren to bed, I don't say to myself, "Here is the beloved grandpa putting his children to bed." I doubt that a famous basketball player says to himself, "Here I am, the famous basketball player, kissing his adoring wife." The occasions in life to do different things help us to see how we change during the day. When I wash the dishes, I could say to myself, "Now I am a dishwasher." When I teach a class, I can say to myself, "Now I am a teacher." When I feel life is difficult and I whine about it, I can say to myself, "Now I am a complainer." It is difficult to maintain my small self identity as being something that doesn't change if I become aware throughout the day that I change who I am based on the activities I do. One step beyond defining who we are by labels, somewhere to go beyond that, is if we create for ourselves an opportunity to drop the labels entirely and just observe what we're doing at that moment in time. Who we are now becomes even more dynamic. We can see even clearer how life changes all the time. When washing the dishes, instead of labeling myself as a dishwasher, I can just say to myself, "Washing dishes." When I take a shower, I can say, "Bathing." As I become more aware of these ongoing activities that make up my life, I notice labeling myself is superfluous. I don't need to say, here I am, a practicing Buddhist taking out the trash. Instead, I can just say, taking out the trash. There's no need for a label. You are just aware of the action, aware of the function you are performing with no judgment or feelings attached to the action. As I live my life, it becomes clear that my activity in life changes all the time. I may at one time take out the trash and another time read a story to my grandchild. Who is to say which action captures who I really am? I can ask myself, who is the self I'm trying to capture anyway? When I'm engaged mindfully in an activity, there is no need for words either, for labeling the self doing the activity or describing the action of the activity. When I begin to wash the dishes, I might say to myself, washing dishes, but that is just a way of shifting my attention to a more sustained, mindful activity. When engaging in an activity in a mindful way, there are no words, but I'm fully aware I am doing this activity I am engaged in. This awareness is the same whether I'm doing something, thinking, observing, or feeling, having a strong emotion. Several years ago, you might say I woke up to listening. I put on some music, and with all my full attention, I just listened to music. There was no separation between the sounds of the music and me. There was no self-talk going on in my head. My mind was just full of music. This is my experience of what it means to be doing something mindfully. We can have the same type of life experience no matter what activity we are engaged in, whether it is taking out the trash, playing an instrument, or sitting zazen. Living in the present moment, I do not gain anything. There is no self that needs to be recognized and applauded. But being human, we will invariably mess up. We will break the precepts. We will behave badly. There will be times when our life story will consume our attention once again. Fortunately, even when our small self, our ego, takes center stage in our lives, our big self does not go away. It may become disturbed by the noise of our compulsions and neurotic behavior, but these states of mind are not permanent. The preoccupations of our small self can be a point of awakening. If we notice the behaviors associated with the small self and ego, we can shift our attention from these mental activities to the simple life-affirming activities of daily life. By noticing our delusions, by paying attention to our life experiences, even if it is catching ourselves in some neurotic behavior and just owning up to it, we wake up. This waking up to the moment, no matter what we may be doing, is the core of our Buddhist practice. It is the moment in which the self is revealed in the functioning of daily living. To be alive is to be open to the activity of the world. To be open to the activity of the world is to be empty. To be empty is to be oneself. Attention. Who am I right now? So at this point in the talk, I open up this time and space for you to make comments or ask questions. So if somebody would like to begin.
My name is Kanjo, and thank you, Rinkai, for your talk this morning. I wanted to say that I especially appreciated the sort of step-by-step fashion that you walked through the sort of different layers of mindfulness, and starting with, okay, well, I'm not the famous basketball player or the adoring grandparent doing the thing. I'm just doing the thing, and then all the way down to just pure activity. I wondered if you had any more that you wanted to say or could say about that sort of, either the step-by-step leading from thinking about being mindful, basically, right, reminding yourself, and whether or not that's a process that you have observed yourself going through over time to where now it's just the end part, or do you have to go through all the different steps to get to the end part over and over again? And I ask that question because I see that both of those in myself sometimes, so I'm curious what you might have to add.
Yeah, I there is not a particular methodology, I guess. Sometimes I find it easier for myself to be aware and in the moment, and sometimes it's much more difficult. So recently, for one reason or another in my life, I've had more anxiety than I have in the past. And I was in a state of just being consumed by worry. And this worry was for, my family and grandchildren, things that were going on in life. And I recognize for myself that takes me out of the moment, because I have this whole repeated story about things falling apart. And I wanted to use that to wake myself up to, where do I really want, is that where I really want to place my attention? And what will happen? I think part of it is there's the fear that I have sometimes that if I don't pay attention to something like the difficulties of my family going through, that somehow that will cause them to fall apart even more. And realizing that that's an illusion is part of me waking up and realizing I'm not, all I am engaged in when I worry about or anxious about life, that life event, is not about living, it's about a story. So stories obviously are different. So that helped me to kind of come back to the moment and say, what am I actually doing right now? Where am I right now? And it may be that I was making breakfast, but then it was a help me to get my attention and refocus. No, what I should be doing right now is making breakfast. And that's the thing, that's what living is about, is the breakfast. It's not about the worrying. I don't know if that makes sense. There are other times in my life where it's much easier to kind of move into what you might call living mindfully. It was a little bit of one of the nicest things about retirement is there's fewer distractions, and so it's easier for me to be mindful because I don't have the distractions of a job. I don't have the distractions of all other things. So I think it depends on the situation. Ultimately, what I try to feel about this is it's like, what are the tools I have to wake up? If I realize that I'm no longer aware of what's going on in my world. I'm not present. And I think the first step is to realize, gee, I'm not really opening myself to life right now. I've got the story. So that's one way. And so I'm trying to come up with different means, ultimately just practical. It's one thing to say, yeah, I want to live a mindful life. But I think we need practical tools to keep bringing us back. And so this is kind of what I came up with. I'm sure there must be others, but these have been really helpful to me. You said something about, I think in your talk you said you divide your talk into, this is what it is, now what do I do? Or something like that. So this is, what do I do? What can I do to wake up?
Thank you.
Fukuan, I really enjoyed your talk as well, and I appreciate the step-by-step too. Early on in your talk when you said, we have to be vigilant, I was thinking, wow, vigilance is kind of, it felt, and people use that, it's not just you.
Right.
I heard it, but I just felt like, ooh, that's like separating and saying, all right, I just have to be stiff. You know what I mean? It has that feeling to it. And so I definitely, I have to be vigilant, but I was really glad that you kind of progressed through it to the point where once you kind of have this habit of being mindful, of being present, there can be this incredible just flow of connection, interconnection, like where there's no separation. And definitely, it's not something that happens all the time, and we have to look at it. And so, both are true, I guess, is what I was feeling, and I was really glad that you got to that one because you really talked about that. And I was thinking of two things. One is, I used to rock climb when I was younger, and one of the great revelations for me was, when you're trying to go up a cliff, that if you try to hug the rock, you just slide down, so you have to get rid of all thoughts and all fears and all idea I'm up 150 feet in the air or whatever, and you just have to push back from the rock and go up, and if you push back from the rock, you go up, and I think, what you were talking about the anxiety you had, I felt the same when I was diagnosed with cancer, I could have, and there's a part of me that kind of would have enjoyed being over dramatic, we all do, right? I could have gotten attention and all kinds of things, But the reality was, first I wasn't that seriously ill, and that's the reality, But it was just like, okay, what do I do today? What do I do? What's happening today? When I went through radiation, was it really that bad? No, there's nothing. You know what I mean? It's just as long as I just did what was there, it's not something else. And when you were talking about anxiety, I just read this thing in the New York Times yesterday or something about that the lifespan of Americans is the lowest of all developed nations, and it's gotten worse in the last 10 years. And I think it was, it wasn't that. I was reading this thing from Red Pine, actually, he was talking about, and that it's because of anxiety. It's because of stress. Basically, he was saying stress, that he felt that was the main thing. And it's only through this kind of mindfulness that we can let that go, I think. And that's what you were talking about. I really appreciate that.
We tend to live in a culture that's very disruptive to mindfulness. I mean, you think about most restaurants you go to, especially the popular places, TVs are on, really loud noise, and it's hard to just, for me, when I go in a place like that, it's hard for me to sit and taste my food because there's so many things that want my attention. And even to the point, just for the very simple thing in our culture, we seem to think it's a gift to multitask. And Harvard did a study on this, and first one of the things of research shows it's impossible to multitask. You cannot do two things at once. What we do is our brain's attention keeps shifting and shifting. And what the conclusion, one of the conclusions was that's very stressful to your mind. It creates, but having been there, there's a certain excitement that comes with that. I mean, this in itself doesn't sound like too exciting, but one of the things about cooking, if you're cooking a meal, you got something here, you got something there, and you have to kind of shift your attention all the time. And that can be kind of, stimulating because you're always doing something. And you know that as long as you pay attention, you'll take this off the stove, you put this here, you get this all thing, and then things will come out right. And that's kind of cool when it comes out right. You got this whole meal, and you put everything out, and people are happy, and you think, yeah, I did that. And it's like, I know that. But we're in a culture where that's practically the norm. Everything we do. We have and we've accepted it so much. We have background music. Well, what are you doing? Are you listening to the background music? Or are you talking to this person here? Are you doing weather? Or are you trying to kind of go, there's music, here's this. And it seems, driving a car, same thing. Driving a car, you're listening to something on tape, you're listening to a podcast or whatever. Well, who's driving the car? And it's I have to make a big effort. I actually did it on the way here because I like listening to music. And I finally turned my music off and I just drove the car. It was kind of cool. You go, pum, 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 pum. And there's that car. And I play a game where I follow the car in front of me. They go a little bit here, I go a little bit there. And it helps me to stay mindful, and I realize, well, there is enough going on just driving the car. I don't need to add music, I don't need to listen to a book on tape. But that's really hard because our culture, that's a norm, and that's kind of an expected behavior. So we live in a culture, there's actually books called that. Our culture creates ADHD because we always have this different stuff going on. So, in this culture we have an especially difficult time being mindful, I think. Living mindfully.
Koshin, thanks for your talk, Rinkai. It's one of my favorite kind of topics, both attention and I've been using the slogan, "Who do I think I am?" And it always just makes me laugh. It's like, who do I think I am? Just but the attention thing, there's from a young age, I didn't want to be played by the culture, like don't fall for whatever they're pushing, fall for the advertising. And these days they talk about attention being the attention economy, so it's like real like a commodity, and so that's been my experience, that I want to protect my attention. But like you mentioned, going to restaurants, I cannot not watch a TV. I just can't. And it's it's I have this attention span that's nimble, I guess. Like any movement, like in our house, any of the animals that are around, it's like, oh, something on the stairs. Oh, no, that's actually not a cat. That's something else. So what I've done is really try to set my intention. I have try to establish a clear intention of what I do with my attention, or else it's just up for grabs. And whatever loudest noise, bright colors, it just sucks me in. So, and then back to that idea of the slogans. That's what has worked for me. Like early on in my noticing what was going on with my mind, and it drew my attention because it was the suffering. It was like, I'm ruminating on a thing while I'm trying to work, and it was just like, God, this is driving me crazy. And then I'd read enough Zen, just early on Zen, it's just like, just work. and I found that comfort in that. And yeah, so I think just some comments, how much I appreciate you talking, bringing it to the forefront. Does my intention align with my actions? And then how do I work with that? Practice with, oh, there's my attention distracted again, and then witnessing, bearing witness to this, like, who am I, is, I tend to wander, but like if I focus on my actions and they're missing the mark, sometimes quite seriously, I can reestablish the intention, course correct, and kind of hold this all loosely. And I have to say that Zazen in a Zen practice is very helpful for that. Here I sit here on the couch on the cushion, and constantly doing that. My attention wanders, and I bring it back, and so yeah, an excellent topic. Thank you.
Let me shut this off, the recording, then we'll do the bows and bows.